Oh, cool. So I'm going to start off today with a story, which I know you guys are not used to. But I'm going to start off, and I do need to let you know my maiden name is Barton. So if you hear me say Barton at any point, that's because that's my original last name. My last name now is Foster. But so growing up in the Barton household, we did not have a lot of family traditions, like barely any at all. And the ones that we did have were kind of weird. So at Christmas time, we would do sugar cookies. Not so weird. At Christmas, my mom would also make this giant cinnamon roll thing. It's called a tea ring. It's amazing, but so good. Yeah, somebody's had it. There you go. But it's hard to describe, so it seems like this weird thing. Every year my mom makes tea rings. She makes like 15 of them, and they take over the entire fridge. And then the other family tradition we had was it was the duty of the head of the household, meaning whichever male was deemed that year, to cut off the head of a butter turkey at Thanksgiving. So if you've ever seen these butter turkeys, they were a thing in like the 90s, and that was a tradition. I told you they were weird traditions. But I will never forget the summer when a new tradition was formed in my family. And so it starts with, honestly, kind of a dark period, well, very dark period in my life. Around the time of 10 years old, my dad had a major head trauma and was flung off of a motor-powered scooter going 30 miles an hour, and was in the hospital for about 3 to 4 months, and honestly woke up a different person. But that side of it is a different story for a different day. This story that I'm talking about takes place kind of smack dab right in the middle of that summer. So Dad had been in a coma for about a month and a half at this point. We weren't allowed to see him because he had gotten so frail that my mom thought that would really disturb us. I was 10. So to see Dad weigh all of like 70 pounds was just not something Mom wanted us to see, which I can't blame her for. And so I'll never forget, she's like, all right, this year we're going to go see fireworks. I just remember thinking, Dad is in the hospital. I'm not allowed to see him. I barely see you because you live at the hospital right now. Why are we going to see fireworks? Like, this is just not the time, Mom. But she said we're going anyway, and so she scrounged up the little bit of money that we had and took us to go see these fireworks. And as you're driving up, if you've ever gone to see like a fireworks show, while you're driving and it starts to get dusk, you see these little fireworks going off in people's backyards. And every time as a kid you turn and you're like, is that the show? Is that it? Mom, we're going the wrong way. No, we're going the right way. We go to the same place every year. They're always in the same spot. But Mom, did you see that one? And then you park, because we were too poor to afford actually going into the park, so we would just park outside and watch them from a hill. And so Mom would, we'd park the van, and we'd all be staring one direction, and one would go off, and we'd be like, Mom, we're pacing the wrong way. She's like, they come out of the same field every year. Calm down. But then when the actual fireworks start, it's just this awe-inspiring experience where you're just standing there and you're like, that's what I'm supposed to be looking for. And I think that year, honestly, we all bawled, because it was just like, it was this small piece of normalcy in a world where nothing was normal. And looking back, I'm so grateful that my mom took us. And I'm so grateful that we started this tradition. Now in our household, Nate's eyes, we have to go see fireworks every year to keep this going. Not because of the patriotism, not because of anything else that most people go see fireworks for, but just because for me, that was such a profound place of like normalcy in my life where like life was just not. And so this week, as I was thinking through Paul's message in all of Colossians and what is he saying, where is he taking us, God kind of brought this story back to mind. And he did it because as Paul winds down with his message, he at the very end wants to teach us how to look for the real fireworks in our life. Not the ones that go off on the way to, not the ones that are kind of there but don't really matter. But instead, Paul really wants us to understand how to live this message that he's given us and pay attention to the real fireworks. Now, analogies will break down at some point, so if this one broke down a little bit, forgive me. But this whole message is about paying attention and looking for the real fireworks. And so Paul's message through Colossians 1 through 3 is kind of an A plus B plus C equals D sort of thing. He tells us in the beginning who Christ is. He says that he is the seeable God when we can't see God. He says that he is everything that we've been looking for. And then through the book, he says, now that you have that, live that out. Like, don't continue to walk around in the darkness. Don't continue to walk around in these old clothes, as Caleb put it last week. But instead, put on the glory that God has for you. Put on this goodness. And as we get to the end of the book, Colossians 4 will tell us how to live now that we have that new life. And so it's going to be a really practical message. So I hope that you guys are able to take something from that away. And the two biggest words that I want you to walk away with above and beyond anything else is these: pay attention. So let's go ahead and bring up Colossians 4, 2 through 6, and we're going to go ahead and read those together. All right. Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful. Oopsie, I knew I was going to do that. I'm going to pay attention to the screen. Devote yourself to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. Pray for us, too, that God will give us many opportunities to speak about his mysterious plan concerning Christ. That is why I am here in chains. Pray that I will proclaim this message as clearly as I should. Live wisely among those who are not believers, and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. If you guys will just pray with me. Dear God, I just thank you so much for who you are. I thank you that you've given your people this word, this book, this Bible, to get to know you better. I pray today, as we walk through this passage together, that we are able to take something away from it, that you're able to shape our lives, and that we do things that are devoted solely to you, dear God, and then that we focus our attention on you. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, so when you read passages like, if you can go back to 4:2 for me. It's coming. Sorry, guys. I didn't tell him I was going to do that. That was my bad. When you read passages like Colossians 4:2, it's one of those verses that we say, and we say an awful lot in a very short amount of time, and don't always stop to look at each little section, so we're going to do that today together. So the first part here says, devote yourself to prayer. And I started thinking, okay, what does it mean to devote yourself to? Because that word, we use it, but we don't, sort of thing nowadays. So I started thinking about it, and the first thing that came to mind was school. So for anyone who's in school right now, the way that we devote ourselves to school is by we adjust our schedule, right? Because we have to be at class at a certain time, we have to get assignments turned in, we have to respond to this post, we have to create this reflection, we have to plan group projects, and on and on and on and on. And in order to do that well, we have to devote our lives to it. We have to say, hey, I'm going to change my entire structure of what I'm doing in order to do this well. The same thing goes with, like, if you're trying to exercise or get in shape. You're honestly going to have to change everything, almost everything about how you do life in order to do that. You change how you get up in the morning, you may change how you go to bed, you change what time you get up, what time you go to bed, what you eat, what you drink, you stay away from certain things, you go closer to certain things. There's just a lot that goes into that, and I think that's the sort of concept Paul's saying. Devote yourself to prayer. It's a continual thing that should not just be something we do, but it shapes how we live. And then he says, what are we devoting ourselves to? To prayer, which sometimes can feel an awful lot like a monologue, where we're like talking out to the great abyss. But that's because prayer, in its fundamental concept, is just a conversation. It's a conversation between you and God, which means we have to give space for God to speak. And so what Paul is saying is to devote yourself to conversations with God. Have them at every opportunity and any time you can. And he says to do that two different ways. He says to do it with an alert mind and a thankful heart. This alert mind is actually the same thing that Jesus says, it's the same Greek word that Jesus uses when he's talking to his disciples in the garden, and he says to keep watch. It's this idea of a constant looking out. It's a constant, like, what's going on? Which we're honestly not good at in our culture, right? Because we walk around, I don't have my phone with me, I meant to have it, but we walk around like this, right? And we try to not run into things. Yep, yeah. Which makes it really hard to stay alert. Like, when we do that, we miss the people around us who are suffering. We miss the people who are downtrodden. We miss the people who maybe honestly are just, they have a grimace on their face, and we don't even step into those conversations with people because we're just so focused on what we want. And even when we're flipping through, we're looking for, ooh, that's a cool picture, I'm gonna like it. Or, ooh, that's a neat thing, so I'm gonna, yes, I like that video. Or, that's funny, a cat. But we're missing the single line of the person that says, I'm really struggling. We miss the line of the person that says, I have no community. And the cool part is that if we walk around in life devoting ourselves to prayer and having alert mind, that means God is asking us to be present in every moment, and that's where our prayer life comes out of. Because when we see that person that says, man, I'm just lonely, we pray for them. And a lot of times, let's face it, God will say, hey, go reach out, right? I mean, that's not normally just a prayer thing, but it's putting ourselves in places to pay attention to others. That's how we have an alert mind in our prayer. And then he says we do it by having a thankful heart, which, again, is really, really hard in our culture. We are inundated every single day with, this isn't good enough, you're not good enough, you don't have enough. In fact, I've heard somebody say one time that all of human culture right now, the only thing we're designed to do is to consume. And so out of that, all that we should be doing is consuming more and more and more. So the way that our media gets us is by telling you, you need more and more and more and more. And honestly, guys, when I'm talking about all of this, I am so guilty of it. In fact, my husband giggled that I'm going to use this in this example, but it's so true. I'm kind of obsessed with the app Zillow. I'm a little obsessed because when we lived out in Southwest Virginia, while life was not a good experience at all, we did have a 3-bedroom house with a 1.5-car garage and a half basement, which I was able to build a library in, which if you've ever been in my house, it's a thing. And we had like 3 porches and this beautiful screened-in, I loved our house. And then, to get out of that situation, we moved to a trailer, which to call it a hole in the wall was being generous. It literally had holes in the wall. It had no screens. Bugs could just come in and out, and it was in the middle of summer, so y'all think it's hot in here? Like, that was our trailer. It smelled. I'm sorry, but it did. And so when we moved here, you would think I would be super grateful for the apartment that we have. No bugs, no smell. It's cool. Oh, yes, that's such a praise report. But no, instead my mind is always on the next thing. Like, I want a new house. Let me see what we can get for what our budget will be when we do move. Let's see if we can get this. Ooh, another space for a library. My brain is always going. They've seen my office. This is why I literally, when we move, we have like 75 boxes of books. Like, I'm not kidding. It's a thing in my life. But instead of being grateful for what I have, which is honestly such a blessing from where we come from, I focused so much on it could be better. But let's face it, guys, the fact that we got to get up this morning, go into the bathroom, and turn the faucet, and something comes out, is a huge gift. For anybody going to school, the stats of the world is that 6% of the world has an undergraduate degree. 3% has a master's, and 1% has a PhD. So when we're sitting back and thinking, man, I don't have a lot, we've got an awful lot. And we've got to love a God that loves us more than we could ever understand without all those material things that we do get to do. Even just the fact that we get up and take a breath. We get to live another day. The sun came up again. All of these things are things that should cause us to be thankful, but we're so busy paying attention to everything else, we miss it. So what Paul is saying, guys, is to pay attention. And if we do that, our prayer life will be completely different because we'll be living in places of thanksgiving and we'll be living, interceding for others. Because I've come to a place in my life where I found I can't fix everything for everybody, which if you're a fixer, that's like the worst place to ever have to figure out that you're living. I can't fix you. But the cool part is that, no, I can't fix you, but I've got an awful big daddy in heaven who would love to help. So I can't fix, but I can pray. And so that's one thing that Paul is saying here. So the first thing that he says as his culminating message at the end of how to do life is to devote yourself to prayer, which is how we live with God. And if you can go on to verse 5 and 6, then he tells us how to live with others. Sorry, again, I didn't tell them I was doing this, so this is my bad. All right. Live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations be gracious and attractive, so that you will not have the right response. You will have the right response for everyone. Sorry, I can read. But what Paul is saying here is he's helping us understand how to live among others. And I don't know where it came from, but for a while, Christians have been known for being dull. I actually heard a whole sermon this past week on this one concept. We're known for being dull, dreary. We just don't know how to have fun. And Paul's saying the exact opposite, guys. He's saying be gracious, which means talk kindly to others. But in the Greek, it actually uses the word instead of attractive, it says salt. Yeah. Now, this is not salty like I'm passive-aggressive salty. Okay, let's not take it too far now. But this is salt, like let's live a life seasoned well. Have you ever had a dish that's dull and you add a little bit of salt to it? Or if it's got just a little bit of kick and you put a little too much salt, about knocks your socks off. And that's kind of what Paul's saying is like add seasoning to life. And as I was thinking about it this week, one of the places I think we're most told that we're dull is probably in our faith. But guys, we have the greatest story ever told in all of humanity. It starts at Genesis 1:1, when God created the world. He created it not because he needed anything, but because he wanted something. He wanted us. And then we decided, nope, I've got a better way. And so we severed that love. So the entire Bible is a story of God saying, I want you back. I love you so much, I'm willing to come and give everything on a cross so that you can come live with me forever. It is the greatest love story ever told. And we act like it's dull. And that's not true. We celebrate the firefighter who'll go up the tree and get the cat. We'll celebrate the lifeguard who goes and saves the person in the ocean. And that's not that we shouldn't. But what Christ did on the cross is so much more. And that's what Paul's saying, is to focus on those things. Because if we pay attention to the fact that we have this amazing message to share with others, it'll help us understand how to talk to people. It'll help us understand, what does this life need to look like? How do I love one another well? So the cool thing that is in all of this is that Paul literally gives us the tangible ways to do it. He says to love God and devote ourselves to prayer, and then to pay attention to those around us. And paying attention, guys, like I said, means living in the moment. And we do that by paying attention to what we have, what God has given us, and those who are around us. And I'm actually going to end a little bit early, so if the band wants to come up, sorry about that, guys. But I think there's something really cool in this message for everyone. Can you imagine if we were a church that lived this way? That if every opportunity, every place we came, we saw as a place to pay attention, as a place to see others for what they're really going through. There's this whole theory in psychology called the Bowen theory, where literally what he claims is that good conversation is 100% of me coming to a 100% of someone else. And that's where real connection happens. And I think as Christians, that's what we're called to. It's not about giving 50% to my phone and 50% to the person around us. It's not about giving 50% of my life to maybe prayer, maybe 20% if we're being real honest, and focusing the rest of it on on whatever else I want. It's about devoting ourselves. And these things are things I struggle with. Honestly, I'm never one who sits still real well, ever. It's just not something I do. People giggle in the audience because they know it's true. I just don't. I'm not the best at like sitting in what God has for me, or even smelling the roses, as the phrase goes. But what Paul is encouraging us in his message in Colossians is that matters. And that we as Christians were called to live in those places, because that's where people meet God. Is having somebody in a world where 50% of life is spent on a phone and you put the phone down. It's in having somebody who constantly says, I'm going to pray for you, in a world that's just stuck in me. And this is going to be something that I'm going to take home. I honestly have put before myself, and this is not a big blow me up or anything, but just as we're rehearsing through this message, I've coveted to myself to get rid of Zillow for a while, which I know doesn't sound like a big thing, but it is, guys. This is like monumental, because I want to focus more of my life around these things. And can you imagine if we as a church body did that? If we focus more on others instead of ourselves. If you guys will stand with me.